Thank you, Sukhi, and thank you, Khaki Lab, for having me deliver this talk. uh, I have to tell all of you that I went on one of the Khaki Lab walks, and it was really exciting because that walk was around Opera House area in Mumbai, and it brought alive a lot of the material that I have been researching for several years now. So I urge you to go on the Khaki tours walks, and especially the one around Opera House after this talk. Uh, so to begin with, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the manner in which Hindustani music and was studied and performed traditionally. I'm a first generation musician. That is that I chose to take this as a profession, take this up as a profession. No one in my family did that earlier. Whereas over 100 years ago, this music, Hindustani music, which is the art or classical music tradition of northern India, was primarily pursued as a profession by members of hereditary musician and courtesan families. The patronage that they got at that moment was from uh, the princely patrons, that is the Rajas, Maharajas, Nawabs. But as you're all aware, by the early 19th century, British colonial rule uh, was well entrenched in India. By 1857, after the revolt of the 1857, the British Crown was the suzerain power. Mm, So around that time, there was a sharp decline in princely patronage to this music. And musicians and courtesans, as a result, had to look for alternative sources of livelihood and patronage. And colonial cities like Bombay and Calcutta, I'm using these names because it's in a historical context. Today they are called Mumbai and Kolkata. Musicians and courtesans from northern and central India moved to these two cities in an effort to take advantage of the patronage that these cities offered. Bombay, of course, was a prime location for this patronage because there was a mercantile elite here, there was an industrial elite here, and even intellectual elite. All of them patronized this music. To begin with, of course, the early performances in Bombay focused on women performers who sang and danced uh, and were trained in singing and dancing uh, along with accompaniment from male musicians. Uh, they, due to the patronage that they were receiving uh, in the homes of their patrons in Bombay, uh, they also invited and attracted male musicians who acted as their ustads or teachers in the city. By and by, we find that many musicians belonging to very well-known khandans or families of musicians, hereditary families of musicians, they moved to Bombay. One was, of course, to teach these women uh, and thereby gain their patronage. Uh, Also, some of them moved to Bombay to accompany these musicians. So, to begin with, around the earliest musician that one comes across who came to, I mean, a well-known musician who came to Bombay in the early part of the 19th century was Sher Khan. Sher Khan was from the Agra Gharana and a very well-known figure from the Agra Gharana, and his successors they chose to stay in Bombay. One thing that we need to remember is that many of these musicians made Bombay a temporary residence because there were still last vestiges of princely patronage. So they wanted to take advantage of that as well. So it was not a complete migration. But by and by, they decided to make Bombay their permanent residence. And so I'll just share the main areas in the city where you found musicians around this time. I'll just show you a map. So there's Grant Road area, there's Kalba Devi Road, Khetwadi, and Baikala. These were the prime locations. Okay. Then, of course, they moved to other areas, but this was in the, you can say, in the late 19th century and early 20th century. This is where musicians were primarily residing. So I mentioned the first one of the first musicians here being a vocalist from the Agra Gharana, Sher Khan. His son was Nathan Khan Agrewale, who also stayed here for some time and taught here. He taught women singers as well as male musicians. And one of the sons of Nathan Khan Agrewale was Vilayat Hussain Khan, a very prominent vocalist of the Agra Gharana, also a very, very well-known composer. He composed with the pen name Pran Pia. So I'm going to play you an early 78 RPM recording of his. Yeah, that was Rag Bhupali, and the performer was Vilayat Hussain Khan of the Agra Gharana. Uh, so when these musicians migrated to Bombay in the second half of the 19th century, their their main students were women professional performers who came from the courtesan families and who had also migrated to this area. Another group of women performers, other than the ones who came from northern and central India, were those who came from Goa and neighboring areas. And they belonged to the Devdasi community, who were traditionally temple attendants in Goa and those adjoining areas. They moved to Bombay to look for these gurus, these ustads, and to break away from their traditional role as temple attendants. for a variety of reasons. Mm, so, so there was this kind of training that was taking place in Bombay, uh, but what had changed was there was no princely patronage. Princely patronage, as I said, came earlier from the various rulers in cash and kind. But what happened, the main change in Bombay was that now these ustads started getting a monthly fee, like a salary from these women performers. Um, Teaching, of course, continued in a more or less traditional manner, which was called the Guru Shishya Parampara. Um, Generally speaking, in the Guru Shishya Parampara, the disciple had to serve the Guru, and normally there was no payment in cash. The payment was more in kind, doing various jobs for the gurus. But in the case of these women performers, they were paying a salary to these gurus. Uh, this was the time we move ahead in the 19th century, towards, let's say, the 1870s and 1880s. And this was the time, as you're all aware, when India was seeing a nascent national consciousness, for freedom, independence from British rule. Many of the people, particularly the intellectual elite, who were leading this movement, saw were looking for symbols of a national culture. And Hindustani music was adopted as one symbol of a national culture. And so many of the elite, intellectual elite, decided to uh, propagate and promote this system of music, so that people from other sections of the community could also study this music. The idea was also to prove to the Westerners that we had this long tradition, going back several centuries, um, and that many of them wanted to also prove that everything that was involved, which was included in Western music, like a notation system, that also existed for Hindustani music. So they evolved new systems of notation as well. Um, the people who aligned themselves to this perspective and worked in prolifically in Hindustani music, like for instance Vishnu Narayan Bhatkande and Vishnu Digambar Paluskar. They looked at themselves as reformers in this context. Uh, so the intellectual elite, one of the things that they did was to set up music clubs in, so to kind of institutionalize the system of music education. One of the first music clubs, formal music clubs to be formed to be set up in Bombay, was called Parsi Gayan Uttejak Mandali. That comes as a surprise to many, because normally we typecast Parsis as a community connected only to Western music. But that was not the case here. And the main person who headed this mandali was Kaikushru Navroji Kabraji. He was also the editor of Rast Guftar. So he set this up along with help from others, including Firosha Mehta and others. Dadabhai Nauroji was president of this mandali for 5 years. Of course, this mandali was primarily for the Parsi community to teach traditional Hindustani music to members of the Parsi community. Uh, the idea, of course, was not to have members take this up as a professional pursuit. It was to train amateur singers. Please remember that this was still not the time when first generation musicians like me could come out there, because there was also a huge social stigma attached to the performance aspect, primarily because much of the performance was being done by women performers. And women performers and their accompanists were treated as a debauched lot due to the existing sense of Victorian morality, which had influenced this intellectual elite. Uh, so uh, this mandali was set up in 1870, October 1870, and continued for a few decades. They held regular periodical jalsas, and they brought out a publication of these many of these jalsas in 1887, uh, and that publication of 1887 is actually a compendium of 1100 compositions that were performed in all the Mandali Jalsas. Uh, the Mandali had engaged ustads from these hereditary families to teach members of the Mandali. Uh, um, uh, the work of the Mandali is also crucial uh, because one of the members, when it was opened out to other sections of the society, like Hindus, one of the members was Vishnu Narayan Bhatkande. And it is in the atmosphere of the Mandali that he was inspired to collect compositions from hereditary ustads, and later continued his work and brought out the many volumes like Kramik Pustak Malika and Hindustani Sangeet Paddhati. In fact, one of his, the first publication that he brought out was published by the Mandali in Gujarati, Swar Malika. I think it was in 1908. Uh, so one of the teachers there was Nazir Khan, and he is an important figure in the context of Bombay because, like I said, many of the musicians came from northern and central India to Bombay. They, of course, had heard each other whenever they were performing in uh, the princely darbars, but exchange of musical ideas was more possible once they migrated to this city, and new elements came into existence. And Nazir Khan and his brothers, they were originally sarangi players, but also trained in vocal music, and they hailed from Muradabad. Uh, they started a gharana, or a school of, not a school as in an academic school, but a music musical lineage, which was called Bhendi Bazar Gharana. Bhendi Bazar, as you know, comes from the term from behind the bazaar, but it came to be known as the Bhendi Bazar Gharana. Uh, he had a very good dialogue with Bhatkande uh, at the Mandali, and they exchanged many ideas, they exchanged compositions as well. Unfortunately, we don't have a recording of we don't have a recording of Nazir Khan, but we have a recording of a member of his family from the next generation, Aman Ali Khan. Aman Ali Khan was Nazir Khan's brother's son, nephew, Chajju Khan's son. So I'll play a recording of Aman Ali Khan. He sings a Carnatic rag, Hansadwani. Um, So I was talking about the Mandali and of course Nazir Khan Bhendi Bazaar wale. Uh, there were a few other music clubs that were set up also. There was Trinity Club. There were a few, but after that, people felt that they needed to set up music schools, larger spaces with a proper syllabus and timing, specific timing for teaching uh, on every day of the week. One of the major schools that was set up in Bombay was the Gandharva Mahavidyalaya. It was originally set up in 1901, May 5th, 1901, at Lahore, but then the it was shifted. That branch continued, but the headquarters was shifted to Bombay in 1908. And it went through many changes, but it was a major institution in Bombay for Hindustani music, uh, set up by Vishnu Digambar Paluskar. Uh, Paluskar later on started music conferences in Bombay under the aegis of the Gandharva Mahavidyalaya, where many musicians from across gharanas were invited to perform. Uh, People spoke about various aspects of music making. Instrument exhibitions were set up. This music school had an instrument making section as well. And it also published textbooks. So a lot of musical activities were undertaken by this school. Um, because of the activities of the Gandharva Mahavidyalaya and the music clubs, uh, hereditary musicians also felt the need to widen their scope of activities. And they realized that there was a growing uh, need from other sections of the society to take to learning this music. And so a tuition ethos um, evolved. What was this actually? They started visiting the houses of their students on a monthly salary. Uh, mm, it used to be around 25 rupees a month. And if there was a tabla accompanist, he would be given 10 rupees per month. Uh, that was in the early part of the 20th century, almost till mid 20th century. This continued. The fees started increasing later on. Uh, I'm mentioning these fees. I'm mentioning the context in which all this was happening, so that you get to know the challenges which these which were faced by these hereditary musicians who had migrated. I mean, earlier they were being patronized by princely patrons, so their needs were taken care of whenever they were engaged in the royal darbars. But once in a colonial city where the colonial power was not encouraging or patronizing any such activity. Remember that music broadcasts on All India Radio started much later. Mm, but otherwise, there was no colonial patronage to this system of music and the music makers. So they had to really fend for themselves. And so one way, of course, was performances as and when they came their way. Uh, the other was teaching. And so teaching outside their community of musicians was an important avenue of livelihood for them. Uh, so the power equation also changed. because in the traditional Guru Shishya Parampara, the Guru was the central figure. Uh, he could determine the time at which the teaching would take place. He could determine the duration. He could determine the nature of the repertoire that was being handed down. He could determine the pedagogic method in that he would want to execute. But in the case of the tuitions, this setup changed, and it was a predetermined time and space that he had to operate within. Um, this, of course, was the change in teaching. Later, because these schools were growing and more public attention was being attracted, some of these hereditary musicians came together under the leadership of Vilayat Hussain Khan, whose recording I had played to you earlier. Uh, um, and they tried to set up, they set up a Sangeet Pracharak Mandal, and the idea was that these hereditary musicians should come together and formulate a kind of a syllabus which then they could teach to various people interested in this music. Uh, Unfortunately, they couldn't, come to a consensus about the syllabus because, as you would imagine, that each of them came from different musical lineages with their own perspective, their own philosophies of making music. But it's interesting to note that even hereditary musicians, once they were in this city, they decided to uh, cope with changing trends, and the same thing they did with in the sphere of performance as well. Within the Hindustani music realm, uh, they changed performance practices. For instance, women performers, many of them, particularly from the Devdasi community, they gave up dancing and focused entirely on singing. Uh, we don't really know why they did that, but perhaps it was to get rid of the social stigma that was attached to their performances and their very being, actually. Perhaps that's the reason why they gave up the dance aspect. Um Earlier, the attire was different, uh, but everything they wore a peshwaj for dancing. So, and you can see pictorial representations of that as well. Uh, but now they gave that up. Similarly, musicians in the context of their performances for music clubs and other places, they started incorporating even Marathi Natya Sangeet or theater music, which they didn't do earlier. Uh, Earlier, their repertoire only consisted of Hindustani music, traditional Hindustani music compositions. But now it expanded, and some of them, in fact, included also nationalist songs. For the freedom movement. So you see that many trends are changing now. Uh, an important aspect to note is that apart from, because I said that they were facing challenges in the city, so they needed to look for alternative sources of income as well. So they took up employment in theater, uh, in the traveling theatrical productions, Marathi, Urdu, Parsi, Natak, all these, they were employing musicians. Uh, Apart from that, when cinema starts, they take to cinema as well as sessions musicians, as composers. When broadcasting starts, they take to broadcasting as well. When the recording industry begins, uh, the earliest Hindustani recording being made in 1902. So they take to recording as well. But importantly, many of the male musicians didn't take to this changing technology very easily. Many of them had believed in these myths that if you disembodied the voice, it was trapped in this device, and you might lose your voice as a result. Others felt that they were divulging trade secrets once those were recorded on these devices or were broadcast. So they didn't embrace these changes immediately. It was the women performers who did that first. But by and by, they too decided that they needed to accept these changes because it widened their reach, and they could gain more audiences across the country. So this was the change in performance as well. So there were changes, major changes in pedagogy. There were major changes in performance. Uh, while talking about pedagogy, we have to also note that many publications came out around this time. Uh, and many of them were brought out by musicians in collaboration with members of the intellectual elite. And it's very interesting. So you have manuals for sitar, you have manuals for vocal music. One of the key figures in the late 19th century in Bombay was Balkrishna Bua Ichalkaranjikar, who was from the Gwalior Gharana. He was the guru of Vishnu Digambar Paluskar. So he had set up a class in Bombay, and major, very prominent members of the intellectual elite were his students. He brought out a magazine to Sangeet Darpan, and uh, and there were books, as I said. So, mm, uh, so you see that hereditary musicians or musicians belonging to these lineages, musical lineages, took to writing about music. I mean, not that they weren't doing that earlier, but in a printed form, and realizing that a mass production of this would reach a wider audience, they took to it rapidly. So, how are we going for time? Oh, 6:47. So I'm going to end this talk with one recording which I must play to you. This is by Kesar Bhai Kerkar, who originally was from Goa. This recording was made at the Blavatsky Lodge. And for those of you who want to see the Blavatsky Lodge, please join the Khaki Tours, the walk, and they will take you to that lodge. Uh, Okay, so that was Kesarbai Kerkar, originally from Goa. She had made Bombay her home, and she was from the Jaipur Atroli Gharana, a disciple, very prominent disciple of Allah Dia Khan Sahab, the founder of the Gharana, who also had migrated to Bombay. So you see that many gharanas are represented in this city. Um, Instrumentalists also came to the city, um, uh, and there was a lot of eclecticism also in the city because once there were so many gurus. Sometimes students learn from more than one guru. Of course, they didn't do any guru hopping. It was not like one guru in the morning and one guru in the evening. It was with the explicit permission of the previous guru that they moved to the next, because that was the tradition. But I'll stop here and invite questions if you have any.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That was delightful. You just feel so proud of Bombay being so replete with musical history among so many other things. Sometimes we tend to forget that we are sitting in that valley of rich music and its history. I think that you talked a little bit about you talked a bit about Guru Shishya Parampara. And till when do you think it continued? And then eventually, obviously now it's all classes and it must be very, very limited. Tell us a little bit about where it is now.
Oh, it very much continues. I learned in that tradition. Of course, I did both. I was in a music school, but later on I moved to completely to the Guru Shishya tradition, and it continues even today. The mentor-mentee kind of association continues. Each of us teachers, it's an individual instruction. It's customized instruction, uh, given the specific needs of the student. You gear everything accordingly, and navigate through the repertoire accordingly.
And I think I made a beautiful connection when you talked about the fact that it got picked up as as an example of the national our own culture rather than an acquired culture. So that
Yes.
completely made sense. And also very nice to hear about the fact about the Parsi support to the Hindustani music, something that we don't often hear about.
Yeah.
Um, Jyoti says that the Guru Shishya Parampara exists in the 20th century as well because she knows about Pandit Jitendra Abhishek and his students like Mahesh Kale and so on. Bharat has asked about where, the Goans of that time struggled with Marathi as well. So, how did they take up Hindustani? That's, I think, an interesting question.
Yeah, that question is relevant even today, Bharat, because very often people who are not accustomed to Hindi or dialects of Hindi often have problems of pronunciation, and you find those problems then reflected even in printed material where some words are get kind of mixed up, uh, and that's a problem that is relevant even today. So yeah, I'm sure those were challenges in those days as well.
Maybe the language becomes richer as both the languages acquire words from each other because
Possibly.
overlap.
Yes.
And in fact, you were talking about the Bhendi Bazaar Gharana, and we had Pandit Amrendra Dhaneshwar ji here last week, and he was talking about the Gharana as well, and he played us some music as well. So that was really nice. Yogesh said that the information you're giving is so precious; it's almost lost in time unless researchers like you bring it to us. And grateful for throwing light on this information.
Thank you.
Bharat also has a question. Who was the first upper caste person to take up Hindustani music in Mumbai, in Bombay?
Bharat, you can't really pinpoint, a particular person. Are you talking about a professional musician or?
Yeah, professional musician who would be from not the traditional नाचने बजाने वाले community, you know.
So, Balkrishna Bua Ichalkaranjikar
Okay.
was upper caste, and Paluskar, and so many others. Wazebua.
Yeah.
Prasad mentions, of course, that Pandit Paluskar is said to have started concerts where people had to pay because then he got them to come
Yes.
out of the temples and courts and to listen to performances in public
Yes.
places.
Yes. There are there is a divergence of opinion who started the first ticketed concert. Okay, some people say Abdul Karim Hasab started. Some people say Paluskar started. But yes, around the same time, these things were happening. When we are talking about the ticketed concerts, let me just see if I can at least show you the picture because this will be very interesting for you. So this was a program that was held in the Bombay University Convocation Hall.
50 master musicians.
Yes. And this was in 1944. And you see that the ticket rates are mentioned for 8 sittings from 150 to 30 rupees. And the balcony was 20 rupees. That was unreserved.
Those are pretty rich prices. I mean,
Yes, yes. And this was a major, today we are accustomed to, attending big festivals, music festivals, or really big concerts, which attract even tens of thousands of people. But here was one festival which had the best of musicians from across the country, north and south, by the way, north and south, Carnatic music as well as Hindustani music. And it ended with Alladia Khan Saab's, and it's mentioned here, Gayan Samrat Khan Saab, Alladia Khan will also sing at the Congress. And this is a major event that took place, and it was called the Vikramaditya Festival, and also All India Music Congress. So you see that ticketed concerts were slowly coming into existence and becoming more and more popular. And in that sense, it was democratizing the very act of listening to music from private chambers of affluent people to more public avenues. So, for instance, Lakshmi Bagh Hall and Khaki Tours takes you there as well. So, do check that out as well. So, yeah, so
that's interesting. We'll come to the Carnatic part later because there is a question for that.
all
Uh,
right.
Jyoti wants to know that was there any colonial harassment for these Hindustani musical clubs? Because this was were they also seen as supportive of, as you mentioned, for the freedom struggles? So did they come under any flack?
Well, not really, not the music clubs. They were not, I mean, they did see Hindustani music as a symbol of national culture. But at that point, the British colonial rule did not see it as a dangerous move. So they didn't really do anything about that. In fact, the Parsi Gayanotajak Mandali, when it came into existence, it was at a time when even the intellectual elite, though inspired by this sense of national consciousness for freedom, they looked at the British rule as a divine providence. So many of the Mandali concerts would end with "God Save the Queen," and
They
that was translated in Gujarati. There was a huge national anthem project, and "God Save the Queen" was, the British Crown was trying to establish that as the national anthem, and so they got it translated in various languages. But that's another story.
Okay. Ram wants to know that while there were quite a few tutors for singers in the late 1800s, were there tutors for instrumentalists as well, those who were accompanying? So were there any big
Oh,
names?
absolutely. So one of the major names was Munir Khasab, and I come from that tradition. Uh, so Munir Khan Sahab was my guru's grand guru.
Yeah.
Okay. So he originally came from Laliana, which is part of the Meerut district in UP. He stayed in Bombay for several years and trained many disciples there. One of his prime disciples was Ahmad Jan Thirkwa, who lived to the age of, some people say 98, some people say 102. I was fortunate to hear three of his performances when towards the end of his life. And it was so awe-inspiring. And he is one musician who has been recorded perhaps on all formats. So on 78 RPM, on LP, on film. And you still have his prolific recordings available on various formats today. So, in fact, I have the earliest film recording of his made by JBH Wadia Movie Tone. That's available on YouTube for all of you to access. I have it here, but I don't think you're going to enjoy it as much as you would when you see it yourself on YouTube. So, Ahmad Jan Thirakwa. Any other questions, Suki?
Yes, there are. Just give me a minute. Jyoti wants to know if there were any famous Devdasi names who made it to the Hindustani music.
Many, 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 many. So, Kesarbai Kerkar came from that tradition.
Yes,
Mogubai Kurdikar, Srimati Bai Narvekar, um, Indira Vadkar, many, many, the huge number. Yeah, I could go on and on. And fortunately for us, we have recordings of many of them. Anjani Bai Malpekar also came from that tradition. She is the disciple of Nazir Khan, Bhendi Bazaar wale.
wonderful. Nikhil wants says thank you for your talk, and can you please overview some of the challenges you faced in your research methods for these projects, especially collecting any oral histories and making sense of the sparse historical records from this time in Indian history?
Yeah, now that I put it all together, I can't remember the challenges actually. But yeah, so one of the challenges was that secondary source material on this period doesn't have all the information in one place.
Hmm.
Okay. And primary source material, of course, is available in Gujarati, in Marathi, some of it in Hindi as well. Mm, but you need to access, for instance, the Mandali, Parsi Gayan Nityajak Mandali. So I knew of its existence because people, when they were writing biographies of Bhatkande or even Bhatkande writing himself, um, the Mandali was mentioned. But the
Hmm.
actual scope of activities
Hmm.
one didn't know about. Then I got the report of the Mandali from, I think it was published in the 1940s, from Dr. Aban Mistri, who was a tabla player from the Parsi community. So she was very kind enough to share that report with me. And while reading the report was in Gujarati. While reading the report, I got to know of that publication that I mentioned to you from 1887. Then I went hunting for that publication and I got that. And then once having got that, then I started checking what was it that they performed there. So, you have rag-based song forms, right from Drupad, Dhamar, Khayal, Tarana, you have Tappa, Launi, you even have English songs. So all manner of compositions were presented, and between 13 to even 48 items in a single evening. were presented. And there were special concerts for children, there were special concerts for women. Garba was also, Garba, Garbi, all these were also presented. But many of these publications don't have the notation. They only have the song text. Notation in the printed form comes much later. So we do have access to these compositions, but we don't have their notations. But many of these compositions continue to this day. People still sing them. So you see that this is part of a historical continuum.
Mm. Anish, there are more questions,
Yes.
but I do see Shubhaji in the audience.
Yes.
And I'm very interested in asking her who her favorite singer is from Colonial Bombay and a song, and if she could tell us about it and share with her. Shubhaji?
I know for a fact that one major figure is Kesarbai Kerkar, uh,
Ah,
from Colonial Bombay, who she really admires and respects.
I was really hoping that if she responded, then we could have her.
She's not with me right now, so
Okay, maybe we'll come back to her at the end of this.
yes.
But let me just ask you the rest of the questions. There, you also were there any musicians? Sridhar says, were there any musicians who had nationalist songs and who were involved in the freedom movement
In Bombay itself.
in Bombay?
In Bombay, not that I know of in a major way, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but they would include certain songs. For instance, Manji Khan Sahab is said to have sung "Charkha Chala Chala Ke," was one such song. So women performers from elsewhere, uh, they were uh, very keen participants. Not all of them,
Mm-hmm.
but some of them in other parts of the country.
Nishant has mentioned Master Krishna Rao and Dinanath Mangeshkar as a couple of examples in response to that. For,
Yes. So, for instance, Omkarnath Thakur was also, I think he was part of the Congress in Bharuch. Uh, but uh, Narayan Khare, for instance, one of the disciples of Paluskar, was sent by Paluskar to be with Gandhiji. And took part in the salt satyagraha. Actually, you can see his photograph, playing the ektara while walking with Gandhiji. And many of the ashram bhajanavali bhajans have been composed by him. So Paluskar, of course, sang Vande Mataram in many of the Congress sessions. Um and yeah, but if you are thinking of musicians taking part in active politics, then I have not come across any. But yes, Paluskar, for instance, in fact, he had many people from the leaders of the national movement visit Gandharva Mahavidyalaya also. Professor Devdhar and his School of Indian Music. So, in fact, the School of Indian Music, the name was suggested by Sarojini Naidu. Uh,
oh.
yes, and Khaki tours will take you to School of Indian Music as well.
Uh, Back to the question we left earlier, just like Hindustani musicians coming to Bombay, did the Carnatic musicians come over here as well? You made a small mention of that, but are you familiar with
Yes,
any?
they did. I'm not too sure about very prominent musicians because that is not my area of research. But they were coming, in fact, in the Parsi Gayanatajak Mandali, they had one concert in which there was a session with a Carnatic musician as well.
Okay. We then have in the same tune of asking, quizzing you, were there any prominent Britishers who excelled in Hindustani music?
Unfortunately, I have not come across any during this period.
Okay. Okay. And what was the impact, Bharat wants to know, of HM on Sangeet Natak?
However, I might add, just to qualify that, that there were Western music experts who were engaging with
Mhm.
Indian music and even composers engaging with Indian music um, and trying to find similarities or dissimilarities. For instance, one was an Italian pianist who lived for a long time in Bombay, Giovanni Scrinzi. And
Hmm.
he had a fascinating dialogue with Professor Devdhar. And in fact, shared his ideas, Western music, Western ideas of voice culture with Devdhar, and took Devdhar to many Western music concerts and pointed out intricacies to him. He would write in the Times of India, and he instituted a scholarship whereby Paluskar could send Devdhar to study Western music from Scrinzi.
And did they do any collaborative
They didn't.
performance?
No, they didn't do any, not that I know of. But Devdar has written about this dialogue extensively, and then based on that, as well as Scrinzi's own writings in the Times of India and some other sources, I wrote a short paper on that, and which was published also in the NCPA magazine. So you on stage, so you can check that there. It's online.
Nishant wants to know how the film industry impacted the Hindustani music in colonial Bombay.
Like I said that very briefly, I said that many of the musicians joined as part of the instrumental ensembles that went with as a backing ensemble for the songs as well as for the soundtrack background score. Some of them took to composing music. And if you want to know a little bit more about uh, composers who were trained in Hindustani music and joined the film industry, who are themselves performers actually. You could access some articles. I did a series for scroll.in, specifically on this subject.
Subject. Wonderful, wonderful. I don't see Shubhaji here anymore, so
I think her connection must be a little
mhm.
iffy. So
Okay. I think we've run through the questions, and I think what a delight it has been to immerse ourselves into the musical history of Mumbai on this Saturday evening. Thank you so much, Anish, for
thank
this lovely
you.
evening that you have given us today. Thank you to our wonderful audience for being here and for your very engaging and involved questions and participation. It really almost feels like we're sitting in person and talking about music. So I was telling Anish earlier, maybe we'd like to have him in person sometime at Khaki Lab later this year. I hope.
Sure, sure. And I hope then all the participants from today and many more will also meet us there.
I really hope and
A
look forward.
beautiful space. I've been there previously, and it's really nice. And thank you, Bharat, for putting this all together, and to your entire team. And sometime in the near future, Shubha and I will hop onto your Jeep as well.
100%. And it's not possible without all the people in the team supporting me for
Absolutely.
whatever I do, right? Suki has been doing these talks and things like that. It's just not possible for one person to do it. So I'm blessed with good people.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you
On
so much, and look up this Khaki tour walk definitely, and many more.
Thank you so much, Anish. And we will also look up your articles on scroll.in. Thank you so much for being here. And
Thank
thank
you.
you. Good night. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye. Bye everyone. Bye.